Okay, we'll begin now. Thank you very much for taking your time to attend this webinar, jointly presented by Rosslyn Analytics and PwC. The topic today, why elite procurement teams establish centers of analytics. We'll take you through initially a quick overview of where we are today from a very high level perspective, and then our partner from PwC will be taking you into some more granular level detail of the whole operation. So we'll start now. The two presenters today, myself, Hugh Cox, Chief Data Officer and co-founder of Rosslyn Analytics. My primary concern is data and its quality, its trust, its value. And also with me is Nigel Isa.
Hi, I'm Nigel Isa, Director in PwC. I specialise in operational analytics and work with Rosslyn specifically around procurement analytics, but also have a range of other things including supply chain and retail analytics, where we do advanced analytics for our global clients.
So Rosslyn Analytics, very briefly, started 10 years ago or so. We principally bring the possibility of, or the capability of data from multiple data sources, integrate data into the cloud, and provide spend analytics visualization tools, as well as general data analytics visualization tools, contract management, supplier performance. We listed in 2014 on the London Stock Exchange. So a little bit about the world we're in, and this is really the beginning of the flavor of why this is important and why we exist, really. Why does Rosslyn exist, and how we support it, and how do we work with partners such as PwC. The market at the moment, as you can see, if you look on the top right, you can see the commodity price index is a little below where most people would expect it to be right now. You've seen the price of oil, you've seen the price of commodities. It is not in a good place at the moment for those markets, and it is having a meaningful and quantitative impact on our clients and on decision making at the moment. The indexes of the world, you can see industrial production, you can see manufacturing, etc. Those are also feeling the pain at the moment. And principally, I just thought I'd add this chart at the bottom showing you the trend of the European 300 index. You can see which direction it's going in. This will put tremendous pressure on your chief financial officers. It'll put tremendous pressure on your profits, on your bottom line, and what can you do as a function, or how can you support and give a level of comfort that your organization is run as efficiently and procures as efficiently as it's quite useful to always remind myself as to, and Nigel will go into greater detail about this, but it is important to realize that data is not just a nice to have. It replaces, in a sense, or hopefully confirms your gut feeling, but in some cases makes you think completely differently to a problem which you may have for years assumed was working in a certain direction, or assumed you had the right answer. Now you can know whether the data shows that correct assumption, or whether you're still working on the back of an opinion or a long-held assumption. And our ambition is to provide our clients and people in general who are looking at their data for analytics a version of the truth which they can trust to make their decisions based on actual insights. I will now hand over to Nigel, who will take you through the rest of the presentation.
So what I'd like to talk about, first of all, is why analytics can benefit your entire company. And if you just move on to the next slide. What I want to first of all do is do some level setting around when we say analytics. So this is a PwC definition, which is analytics is around managing data. It's around performing analytics, which is typically some sort of model. It's harnessing that insight, and it's delivering that insight normally in a visualization that someone can consume. And we really want to give that broader definition so that it isn't just about one of those elements, but it's a combination of all four of those things. And then this is some survey work that we did called Guts and Gigabytes. And what we did, we surveyed a large number of people globally to understand how they're using data analytics in their organisations. And there's a really key fact here, which is over on the right-hand side, which is saying that people have to make big decisions often every month, and that's 44% of them. Yet, if you then move on to the next slide, the way that that's done is only 30% globally and 23% if you're in the UK of people actually use data analytics to make that decision. So that means that in 70% of cases, frequently big decisions are being made not just on intuition, could be advice, but without data as a backup to that. And just to illustrate why that's important in terms of the world we're in a complex, challenging world, being able to use more intuition is important, because really your intuition is only what's happened in the past, not what could happen in the future. And in a complex world, that is going to be a flawed data point, if your internal data point to do that. So being able to use data to get to a much granular, realistic position is a key skill. If we move on to the next one, well, I wanted to just talk about this. This will seem like a bit of a strange example given we're talking about procurement analytics, but in procurement, most organisations have dealt with the low-hanging fruit or attempted to deal with the low-hanging fruit, and they know how to do it. What a lot of procurement work is around how do I get marginal gains? How do I get that 1%, 2%, 3% everywhere that I need to hit the performance that's been targeted? The people who do that best are actually elite sport. So I'm going to give you just a quick example of how elite sport increasingly uses analytics to both identify what good looks like and then get their people to use that, their team members and their support staff, to achieve that goal. So this example is a sports team in rugby union, Munster provincial team, who are one of the top teams in Europe. And at the top left, these are the questions that the team and the players actually asked. And the key one was, how do they educate themselves in how to play the game better using data? Then how do we quantify what good looks like performance, both when they've got the ball, when they haven't got the ball? So how do they play on the pitch? How do you actually evaluate that outcome? And then how do you get people to actually use it to enhance change? And this is really the key bit to everything we talk about in analytics centres. Is it isn't just around the analytics, it's around how you actually drive change. The bottom right diagram, which may be slightly hard for everyone to see if it's on how big the screen is if you look in the middle, the red box, it says 65%. And what they worked out was, across different areas of the pitch, if they behaved in a certain way, they would win. And if they do that 65% of the time, they will win. And at the bottom graph, the bar graph, there's a yellow line that goes across it. That's 65%. Where there's a red bar, they won. Where there's a black bar, they lost. And you can see in all but one occasions, they lost if they went below that bar. And what that really illustrates is, why is this important to organisations? If you're looking for marginal gains, you're not going to find that through intuition alone. You're going to have to use analytics, you're going to have to set targets, you're going to have to drive people to change and react to those measures. And this is an example of how in elite sport that's been done successfully, and it's a great learning point. But the challenge is, and this is a challenge for everyone who's sitting there now going, that's great, but I sit in a procurement team, is how do I do that? And there are some significant barriers to it. The first one is, how do I acquire the new skills and the experience to generate insight from data that people will actually use? And that is a new skill set. It's a new skill set for procurement people, but also for all functions in all organisations. The other interesting thing is, how do I create a culture where data-driven decision-making is the norm, where traditionally intuition, with backed up by a small amount of data, is probably how you've worked before. And that building that trust is a real challenge, especially when people start always with my data is rubbish. So how do you build up the trust in the intuition and the data sets behind it to enable you to do that? The third one is actually building a technology landscape to access and process all that data. Obviously, I'm with Roslyn today. One of the reasons why we work with them is because they do that type of thing. But with the whole array of different technologies now available, and the legacy infrastructure and the IT departments have been varying levels of support, how do you do that effectively at a cost point that actually doesn't eat into all the benefits you're looking for? And the final one is, any insight you generate is only good today. It degenerates over time. People use it, and time changes, and over time it changes. And so learning to innovate and look for new things is a key skill, and something that organizations often don't do. They do point analysis rather than ongoing analysis and innovate all the time. So we want to move on now is some thoughts and ideas about, given that you have these scarce resources, which are analytics people, how do you use centre of analytics to get the most out of them? So there's 3 core considerations I'm going to talk about. One is around thinking about, you're not going to get a centre of analytics built and deployed up front. It's going to be a journey of getting an organisational commitment to buy into that. Second one is around the new capabilities in procurement analytics that you'll actually need. And the final one is concept of human plus machine, which is that independently they're not going to drive a huge amount of value or a limited amount of value, in terms of a human can only use intuition, a machine can just give you data, but if you can get them working together, that's the key to success. And that's the key of an analytics center, is how do I create that link between people doing analytics and decision makers and operational people using that and using it effectively and believing it. So the first idea is around the journey. So this is a process that we often go through with our clients, which is, how do I build from the bottom left, which is step 1, which is saying I want to explore my data, and I do a proof of concept, the POC, and I get some early adopter advocates going, that's really great, that's really interesting. But then what you often get is a very limited localized implementation of an app and some excitement about the value it's created. The next step is then, normally people invest in some licenses, some infrastructure to allow you to do that locally. The big challenge is the analytics center is the next step, but the next step is quite a big one, because what it requires you to do is to create a level of complexity of analytics that you're doing, and a wide enough adoption in the organization, often beyond the function. So it might be at this point that you have to go, procurement have this aspiration to do it, but so do HR, so can we get a team who could support them both? Is to move to that 4th step, where you start to build something that you can scale up. And finally, over time, you'll get to step 5, which will be around insight-driven operating models and analytics at the centers of the core of that. But that's a long way off, and there's very few organizations that are really there yet. They're often somewhere between step 2, step 3, and very few are moving into step 4. So that's the first idea, that you have to build the commitment. This is a long-term thing, and you only do that through demonstrating success and also demonstrating the scarcity of resource through the complex analytics you're trying to do. The next point really is really focused on procurement, which is going, a lot of people try and answer 4 questions. The first question is question 1, which is, how do I leverage my enterprise spend? And that's often the whole Q-build data aggregation. You then move into, I want to manage compliance, performance and errors, and you want to start doing some more analytics. You start doing some risk analytics, you start using a little bit more data, and you start to manage that insight from there. And the third one is where you start to want to understand things like risk, supply-based risk in my organization, things that I'm exposed to I didn't know about, and that brings up, again, more analytics that you require. And then finally, people say, I want to start to predict, I want to start to prescribe what's going to happen, so I want to understand what could happen in these events, and that brings a whole wider set of analytics. The challenge is, as you move along those questions, the people with the capability to do that probably don't sit in procurement. So that sort of illustrates my first point, but also bring that back to a procurement understanding of, these are the sort of analytics questions people start to want to think about as they consume the previous set of data and use it, and then look for that next marginal gain that they're interested in. And the final point really is the human plus machines. It's a rather complicated diagram, needs a little bit of explanation. So what you've got in the middle there is a production center, which is, if you're building a center of analytics, it would be an enterprise-wide function, given the journey I've just discussed. And what that has is a capability to data handling, analytics and visualization, taking external data and enterprise data, and deploying that to various functions in the organization. But the key bit is that red blob above, which says embed and deploying teams. And the analytics centers need to be about engaging with people, coaching them on the insight that could be generated, working with them to generate that insight, and actually testing whether it worked. And that is a key role of that analytics center. So that's the human plus machine piece. But also people, when they consume things, they ask for new things and new ideas. They work along that four-step question process. So the challenge there is, how do I take new requirements into the organization, do something with it? So it's a constant cycle of looking, and that's where supporting any analytics center is an innovation process. So you have an innovation team who are in the development center, developing, testing new ideas and building new things that then can be deployed into the organization. And they get their ideas from two sources. One is from the organization, one is from new ideas outside of the organization. And part of an analytics center's role is to have an ecosystem of organizations that they can draw upon for ideas, content, knowledge, expertise, technology that will allow them to start to answer those questions. The important bit in here is that if you really want to make this a success, you have to think about, how does the organization start to learn, to utilize the analytics insights. So that's as people move from an intuition-led approach to a human plus machine approach, and also learning to find new insights, so people becoming curious. So the only reason elite sport uses analytics is they know that everyone else is using analytics as well, so they use it as a competitive advantage. And this is how organizations will need to think about is, I can make some step changes, but when I start to get to the marginal points, every bit counts, and if I don't keep innovating, I won't find those new things, and if I don't find those new things, then I'll fall behind. So this whole concept of an organization being more curious and more radical and innovative is a key part to getting the most out of Analytics Center. So having given that quick overview, I'm going to pass back to Hugh for questions.
Just before we go to questions, I'd just like to recap one thing. If we go back a couple of slides, because I think what Nigel said is very important. This particular slide here, the fundamental principle to any of this journey, for you to go from question 1 to question 4, is you've got to take the quality of your data quite seriously. You can't assume your data is good to go, or you've probably been told time and time again, it's too hard, we can't do it, we've tried and we've failed, and it's just not going to happen, so just make do with my spreadsheet or your business objects view or whatever click view visual you've got of your data. You've got to not accept mediocre data, or the whole journey will have a bias towards inaccuracy and approximation straight from day one. The way you can actually get through this exercise and start to do genuine forecasting and optimization, as Nigel was saying, is to really understand where your data is, what state it's in. It doesn't all have to be good. It just has to be understood, and then it has to be taken, add value, taken from its source and integrated, and starts to be, shall we say, understood in order for you to go to things like compliance, etc., and understanding your supplier base and then doing analytics on it. So I just wanted to make sure you understand there is no point aiming for your graphical representation or your pie chart or your 3D scatter graph that spins whatever it does if your fundamental underlying data is not sufficiently trusted and of quality that you can generally use. And I'm not saying it is at the moment, but I'm saying once you go through a process of data extraction, integration, cleansing, you will be in a position where you can then use that data genuinely to do all these wonderful things you want to do, reach that question 4, and start working genuinely with your data within the organization. So I'll now just go back to the idea of questions, and I look forward to hearing them from you. So the first question I have is, what is the best way to approach setting up a center of analytics? Well, I think we covered some of that in the slide just before this one, which is understanding what are the key objectives you need, what are the key principles you need. Here is to understand your position, who are the stakeholders, understanding innovation, understanding opportunity, and getting the buy-in. And quite often to get the buy-in, I think, as we mentioned earlier, and the way PwC do it is most commendable, is to start with a POC and to move from that POC to show value internally, to then be able to explain the value of having aggregated the data, of showing analytics, and then how it may apply beyond procurement. But first of all, quite often, a very deep insight into your data as part of the procurement function can lead to a much wider ranging, a much wider use of the data analytics team that you're currently, shall we say, forming. Maybe a team of 2 or 3 initially, but can grow to quite a lot larger depending on the size of the organization. In your view, what is the driver to success or failure in establishing center of analytics? I think I'll just pass that one on to Nigel. He's got a lot of experience about that. Is what are the key do's and don'ts, I suppose, when you're doing this?
I think one of the key bits I learned in my previous analytics firm is don't recruit lots of data scientists without being very clear what it is you actually want to do analytically, and that's because there are lots of types of analytics you actually need to do. There's lots, and I think of a data scientist as your sort of special forces guys who have a huge logistics function behind it, and the key bit to that is that for every data scientist you have to have many people who can handle data, engage on the change side, act as business partners, deal with visualization, deal with the ongoing data flows, and that's really one of the key don'ts. Is don't think you can just recruit some data scientists and this will get fixed. This is about a multidisciplinary team using actually some of the resources you do have in your organization already, augmented by some people who bring some new skill sets.
Okay, our next few questions. Can you get a copy of the presentation? Yes, my marketing team tells me. Will the slides be available? I presume that's the same question. How would you articulate the benefits to get investment in the first instance? It is a little known until you start seeing the results. Absolutely, and I think that goes back to the concept of the proof of value, proof of concept. You've got to start small, and as Nigel was saying, don't get yourself a team of 25 academics with PhD at the yin-yang about data mining and everything. Start with something you know you can handle. Start with a data set. It's proving the value of the exercise, which is very important. Don't try and bore the ocean. Start with something tangible, small, focused, and then build from there. It's very much an agile development, as in most things nowadays are agile. You've got to find out also what doesn't work. So if you're going to fail quickly and revert back to what does work. What type of people, staff, and skill sets are required to create the Center of Analytics? Someone who's not afraid of innovation, not afraid to go down a few impasses, a few dead ends, but also someone with an objective. So you've got to have a team of people who understand the objective, have a certain amount of understanding of data, and also you've got to get a good sponsor somewhere in the organization as well to make sure that when things don't go quite immediately as they're meant to, you're given the chance to try again and again. But find the objective first, and then go on to this. Another question: the recording of this meeting, is that shareable?
Yeah.
Okay.
Just on the questions, we've had, I think, 3 questions, all sort of in the same space, which is around where's the best place for this to sit. There's one around, is it in the enterprise BI space? And then the question is, how could it be in the procurement space? Analytics centers typically do come out of the BI function, but given what I've just said about the fact that this is human plus machine, it's about change management, it's about actually business value, IT is not the best place typically to deliver that. That's very much a service-driven organization. So there is actually a challenge in organizational structures about, do you now create a new function which is analytics, or do you create centers of analytics embedded into each function, governed centrally in terms of resources and licensing and data, so that you're not duplicating spend? At PwC, who we're building our own capabilities, we've gone for the second model, which is everyone could have an analytics, but we have some core hubs. But where the real cost is in the infrastructure and tools, and it's very specialist people, and we have a tendency to keep them more centrally. But where we have the user groups and the people who are trying to deploy insight, they're localized everywhere. So I think you need to be very careful that you don't try and extend an IT function to do this, because this is different. And the other point about could procurement build one? Yes, you can, but it will probably only get to step 3 on the journey that I told you about, because the amount of benefit you need to generate to justify a lot of these people and resources is, unless you've got a very large procurement function with generate a huge amount of savings, there is a limit to how far that one organisational function can go. But combine it with supply chain, combine it with HR, combine it with marketing, and suddenly the benefit case is a lot bigger, and you can start to break through that.
And there's a question here, which is a very valid question. It's about refresh rates, real-time analytics, streaming data. Yes, the current model, I think the majority of people we see have a schedule. It can be daily, weekly, monthly, or even quarterly sometimes when they refresh their data, depending on their objectives. However, real-time analytics or streaming analytics is, I wouldn't say as the norm, but as the leading edge of some of this analytical exercise. And you do have to have access to a fairly sophisticated infrastructure organization which can deploy this kind of streaming trigger large data capability in order to deliver you meaningful real-time analytics graphically as well as on a data mining basis. There are tools out there that we use that exist that are still at the cutting edge that can do this, but it is something which most of our clients, at the start of their journey from the level 1, as the PwC model was showing, level 2 and 3, first of all, they're trying to get a grip of what is it I have, and then understanding retrospective, obviously predictive, based on that data, then they can move faster. So it's probably going from monthly to weekly, weekly to daily, daily to streaming. And those are the kind of areas which I think we are moving towards now. They're faster refreshes of the same exercise, but it does require sophisticated infrastructure. It can't be done too easily. Another question, have you seen predictive analytics grow in importance? I'll leave that to Nigel.
Yeah, so there's two questions here. One's on predictive analytics, one's on learning algorithms. Slightly different things, but our view of the world at the moment and what we're starting to see is people start to ask, what could happen if I did this, and what will it look like? And so that is starting to happen. A good example I'll just give you is with a major car manufacturer, where they want to be able to predict the impact of their sourcing decisions on their the dependency of their supply network to them on a global basis. And what I mean by that is that they need to start to manage risk, especially when they're competing with other car manufacturers for quite specialist suppliers. So being able to predict in the future what will be the demand on that supplier, and then what will be the tooling costs and the capacity that supplier needs to invest in, and what the cost base will then be for them is a key question when they're sort of making their sourcing choices 5 years in advance. So you start to see those type of questions coming. On the learning algorithms, it's very different. This is much more around sensing, ongoing sensing. So when we talk about questions around risk and around wanting compliance, learning algorithms will increasingly become the norm as we identify signals that we want to test, but then we also don't know the other signals we may look for, so those allow you to fill the gaps. So you don't have to think of doing analytics as a one-off exercise. It becomes an ongoing building of capability as these sensing apps to pick up on lots of things going on in an organisation that you didn't know were happening.
The question about do you think the centralized team located in one place serving a global organization will work? Obviously, not one size fits all, and no organization is identical. However, in principle, having a concept of a hub and maybe local expertise to support locally, but based on information, intuition, knowledge, and standards from the hub is important. You must have a single source of your integrated, aggregated data in order to make sure that everyone around the world in your organization is using the same source to make sure they're making decisions, and not have, as is currently the case in many organizations, it's who's got the latest spreadsheet wins type of thing, or it's a bit of a free-for-all where everybody's got a view of the world. You need to have a single view of the world you can trust, and from there have a series of experts, if you need them locally, especially if there's linguistic or cultural barriers, who can actually deploy that same information to those teams. I don't know if you've got a view on that.
My view is that you can't operate globally with analytics. You have to be at highest level regional, and that's where you're most efficient from the scarce resource point of view of your analytics people, but you have to engage locally. So I think the best model is a regional model with central resource, with local business owner managers, relationship managers, analysts working with the functions locally. Again, it depends how your organisations run. If you've got a European-wide supply chain team, then they match well. If you've got individual country procurement, it gets a little bit more complex.
Do you recommend investing in an enterprise data warehouse for structuring successful BI practice? You'll need some form of repository. Most global organisations, or it doesn't have to be global, regional organisations will have more than one source of data, and therefore, I mean, as an example, you may have one SAP, one Oracle, PeopleSoft, JD, Ariba, whatever system you're currently using. It could be a mixture of many. The data that is important for you to analyze needs to be integrated somewhere. Depending on your time frame, usually the integration of a data warehouse in an organization can take several years. Most of us don't have that much time to wait until we get the answer. Therefore, there are other options, and that is what we specialize in. So I'd say yes, you do need one. It may just not be the obvious, new servers in your data center may not be the obvious answer. In an organization, who typically sponsors successful analytics infrastructure programs?
Yeah, if you could just go back to the journey slide.
It's going. Yep. No.
Next. Keep on going on. There you go. No, next one. Sorry. So on this slide here, it's actually different people at different points. So you'll see I use the word early adopter advocates. What really happens here is people who are really into data, and there's people think in two ways. One is very intuition-led, and the other type of person is quite data-led. And those people generally have got a desire for data, so they'll go out and they'll find a way to get this paid for and get it up and running. And then what you find is that as you move into step 2, they start to get a little bit of sponsorship in the organisation and are able to sort of build up some credibility. But it's only then at step 3 does someone functionally, typically the functional leader, go, actually we should be doing this properly, let's budget for it. As you move to step 4 and step 5, that's when someone in the organisation, it typically will be a COO, someone operational will actually go, we should be doing this properly, and I can see the benefit across the organisation, so let's get this together and do this efficiently. And that takes a much more strategic position. So it's typically a COO. Often the CEO will set an insight, a strategic direction says we need to be more insights driven, more data driven. You hear that quite a lot, possibly in your own organisation. But the people who actually make that happen are typically the operations guys. They're the ones who this matters to. They often have to be enabled by IT because there is a big IT element to this, and to a degree HR. But those guys are the ones who really sponsor it.
There's another question here about determine at the outset. It is vital to determine at the outset the primary versus secondary data, example product data, taxonomy, classification, attributes, and customer data versus transactional. I think what you've got to decide is what are you trying to achieve, and once you've agreed what you're trying to achieve and you've got your initial high-level sponsorship and you've got your objective in place, decide what success looks like, and then go and find the data that marries to that success. Don't simply get data and say what can I find out of it. So don't get a whole bunch of data and hope somewhere in that data is going to be the answer you're looking for. Make sure that you're going to build the data set you need based on the requirement you're targeting. So depending on what your objective is, then understand the data you need, then marry that data to, shall we say, for the sake of argument, a schema of some sort which you can then use to visualize or data mine that data. But don't start with the data hoping it contains information. Start with your objective and go back to the main data, and you'll see straight away what is primary and secondary in that data set. So thank you very much for attending. We will make this available to you both as a slideshow and potentially as a recording. And we thank you very much for your time and attendance, and look forward to hearing from you if you've got any other questions. Thank you.